A strange thing, it is precisely when the world around us is falling apart, something inside us begins to come together. As if from beneath the ruins of our familiar life, something stronger, deeper, unbreakable begins to grow. In every tragedy we see death, pain, and loss. But look closer, and you will see something else. A helping hand, a glance of compassion, light that never fades. In this video, I will show you why hope does not die even in the darkest times, and how to find it when you yourself are at rock bottom. Stay until the end. We will talk about a simple practice that can restore inner balance even after the deepest losses. There is a paradox I have thought about more than once, and maybe you have too. Why is it that in the darkest moments of life we discover the brightest qualities within ourselves? Why is it that when buildings fall we build bridges? Why is it that a tragedy that destroys entire cities can unite the hearts of strangers from different corners of the world? This is not just a question for a philosophical evening. It is a challenge for deep rethinking. Who do we become when we lose everything that kept us afloat? The world is full of tragedies, wars, earthquakes, diseases, disasters. And every time we hear about a new misfortune, something deep inside us tightens. Human life is fragile. Happiness is uncertain. Safety is an illusion. And yet, despite this dark backdrop, again and again something invisible appears, stronger than pain. I have seen it with my own eyes. Perhaps you have too. After tragedy, something more than just recovery arises. Hope arises. Sometimes it seems to me that tragedy is a kind of mirror. It shows us not only what we have lost, but who we really are. We look into emptiness and see strength. We step into silence and hear compassion. We stand among ruins and begin to build. I recall one case. It was in the mid-'80s. A small town in Iowa was struck by a tornado. I came there a bit later to speak to a group of local farmers. We sat in an old hall, without electricity, without heating, just a few generators humming outside. And in that dimly lit hall, I did not see defeat, but the faces of people who had not given up. One of them came up to me after the talk, shook my hand and said, "Mr. Rohn, we lost a lot, but you know what? We didn't lose each other." It was a simple phrase, but it stayed with me for life. In hard times, people begin to see each other differently. Divisions disappear, borders disappear, status disappears, even languages disappear. Tragedy wipes away everything unnecessary and leaves only what is essential. And that essential is not just survival, it is humanity, compassion, dignity, strength of spirit. We often talk about success, goals, wealth, productivity, and those are important topics, but I'll tell you this, success without depth is just surface. And only in the deep waters, those where storms happen, do we truly discover who we are. It is in hardship, not in comfort, that true character is born. When tragedy comes, it tears away masks. It leaves no room for pretense. It places a person before a mirror and asks, what remains in you when everything external is stripped away? And then we see who will fall apart and who will lift others, who will despair, and who will become a source of strength for those nearby. Hope is not always loud. Sometimes it whispers, but it is always heard by those who are ready to listen. And here's what I have understood after all these years of traveling, speaking, failing, and winning. Hope is a choice. It is not just an emotion. It is not a naive belief that everything will be okay. It is an inner decision to keep going, even when the ground shakes beneath your feet. It is the courage to see light, even when surrounded by darkness. And this courage is available to everyone. It does not depend on your education or your bank account. It is born from the choice not to give up. Tragedy is not something we choose, but our reaction to it, that is our choice. And in that lies the deepest source of hope. Because if I can choose not to give up, even when everything screams defeat, then not everything is lost. That means there is still a chance. There is still life. There is still a way. In this video, we will talk about exactly this. I will show you how to recognize this inner strength within yourself, a strength you may not even have suspected. We will touch on pain and loss, but also on strength, dignity, and recovery. I will share with you stories that touched my heart and perhaps will touch yours too. And finally, I will give you a few simple but powerful steps on how to kindle the flame of hope in the darkest moment. Because you know what? Even one spark is enough. I have witnessed the same picture many times. Where ruins lie, where it seems only silence and dust remain, other sounds begin to emerge. A child's cry that turns into laughter. The footsteps of people moving toward one another to help. Voices speaking simple yet noble words. Hold on, we're with you. And that is the secret. Where tragedy comes, hope comes too. It doesn't wait for an invitation, it grows on its own. Like grass through cracks in the asphalt, like dawn after the night. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever wondered why, in the darkest times, the brightest qualities emerge in people? Why someone who has everything may become indifferent, while someone who suffers themselves gives their last? The answer is simple and complex at the same time. Tragedy purifies. It wipes away the unnecessary, leaving only the essence. And in that essence, we see the truth about ourselves. I know how it sounds, as if tragedy is a blessing. No, I am not saying we should seek it. We do not wish for war, disaster, or loss. But we cannot close our eyes to the fact that it is precisely in these conditions that we become stronger. The history of humanity is the history of people who went through trials and found meaning in them. Do you remember, I often repeated, don't wish it were easier, wish you were better. That is what happens when tragedy comes. It forces us to become better or to give up. And the choice is always ours. At 25, I found myself in a tragedy of a different kind. It wasn't war or a natural disaster. It was my own collapse. I was drowning in debt. I saw no way out. I had lost faith in myself. And then my mentor, the same Mr. Schaff, told me the words that became a turning point. Jim, if you want life to change, you must change. That was when I realized that tragedy, even personal, even quiet, hidden from the world, can become a springboard. And you know what? That was when hope was born in me. Because if I can change, then everything is still possible. Think for a moment, how many times have you been on the edge? Maybe you lost loved ones. Maybe you lost a job. Maybe you stood before a mirror and saw a person who had lost their sense of meaning, and yet you are here. You are listening to me. You are breathing. That means one thing. Somewhere inside you, there is already that spark of hope. Because if it weren't there, you wouldn't be searching for answers. You wouldn't be watching this video. Hope is not about closing your eyes to pain. Hope is about seeing the pain and moving forward anyway. In tragedy, there is a moment that tests us. When everything is destroyed, the question is simple. What is left in you? I have seen people who lost their homes but kept their courage. I have seen those who lost their health but kept their faith. And it was that very faith that became their medicine. I like one metaphor. Imagine a candle, a small flame. And in a dark room, the candle may seem weak, but once all the other lights are gone, that candle becomes the only source of light. That is how hope works. In ordinary times, we don't notice its power. But in tragedy, it becomes everything. And you know what's most interesting? A candle can light another candle without losing its flame. That's why in hardship, people begin to share kindness. That's why we see heroes who save others, even at the risk of their own lives. Hope multiplies when we share it. I remember in one city where I was speaking, an earthquake had struck. A few weeks later, we gathered people in a school. And one farmer said to me, Jim, we lost a lot, but we found each other. His eyes were shining, and I thought, isn't that a miracle? Everything external was lost, but the heart was alive. And now let me turn directly to you. Perhaps you are going through a tragedy right now. Maybe your pain is invisible to others, but it is eating you from the inside. And you are asking, where do I find the strength? The answer is simple and at the same time difficult. The strength is already in you. Yes, it is hidden. Yes, it is hard to find when everything seems to be falling apart. But right now, you can choose whether you will let tragedy break you or let it make you stronger. And here's a little intrigue. At the end of this video, I will give you a practical way to ignite that inner candle of hope even when it feels like it has gone out. It's a simple exercise, but it can change your inner state. So stay with me. In the meantime, reflect on this. Tragedy is not the end. It is a test, it is a mirror, and it is a chance. Yes, a chance to see what life is truly worth, a chance to rebuild yourself, because perhaps it is in the ruins that your true home is born. I want to share with you another picture that has stayed in my memory for a long time. I was young when I first saw a person who had lost everything and yet had not lost herself. It was an elderly woman. Her home had burned down in a fire. She stood before the ashes, holding only a small box of old photographs. I expected to see despair, but instead I heard her quietly say, "Jim, we are still alive. That is what matters. We will rebuild the house, but if we lose the heart, nothing can be restored." That was when I realized a person's strength is not in what they have, but in their choice not to lose themselves. Think about this. We often cling to things, to status, to comfort, to the plan we've made, and when tragedy takes all of that, it seems to us it's the end. But the truth is different. It is only the beginning, because that is when we get the chance to see who we can become without all those supports. Have you ever felt that when you lost something and thought, "I can't live without this"? And then time passed and you discovered that not only could you live, but you became stronger? That is the birth of inner resource. I recall my own path. After my financial collapse, when I was left with debts, I could have chosen the path of despair. I could have said, "Life is unfair," and that's it. But instead, I chose to go to people who knew more than me, to learn, and that was when my true transformation began. I'll tell you honestly, without tragedy, I would never have become the Jim Rohn you know. Without defeat, there would be no victory. Tragedy is a challenge, but at the same time, it is an invitation to shed the old skin, to go beyond yourself and see the world anew, an invitation to discover within you a strength you didn't even suspect was there. Here I want to ask you a question so you pause and reflect. What am I doing with my pain? Am I hiding it, carrying it as a burden, or am I turning it into fuel? Because, my friends, pain can be transformed into something great. I knew a man who lost his son in a car accident. No one can measure such pain. But he made a choice. He began speaking in schools, teaching teenagers about responsibility on the road. His tragedy became his mission. He did not get his son back, but he saved dozens of other lives. Here's another truth. Every tragedy can become either a stone that pulls you down or a step that leads you upward. And you decide what it will be for you. Yes, it is hard. Yes, it requires strength. But the choice is always in your hands. Let me say this again so you truly hear it. Tragedy is not a final sentence. It is only the beginning of a new chapter. You may cry, and that is right. You may lose, and that is painful. But you can also lift your head and say, "I will use this to become stronger." Imagine a tree in a storm. The wind breaks branches, bends the trunk, rips off the leaves, and it seems the tree is about to fall. But what is really happening? The roots begin to grow deeper. To hold on, the tree sends its roots further into the ground. And after the storm, it stands even stronger. That is how we are. When tragedy comes, our roots, faith, character, dignity can go deeper, and then we become unshakable. You know what the miracle of tragedy is? It reveals true priorities. It forces us to see what is truly valuable. Success, status, possessions, all that can disappear. But humanity, kindness, devotion, love, those do not burn, do not crumble. And when we begin to hold on to those, we discover a new meaning. Here I want to give you a challenge. Think, if tomorrow you lost everything you have, what would remain with you? Would you be able to say, "I still have a heart, I still have faith, I still have people around me"? Because if so, you already have everything you need to rise again. I remember once saying at a seminar, don't wish for an easy life, wish for a life of character. People laughed then, but later they came up and thanked me. Because deep down we all know it is trials that make us mature. Without them we remain fragile. But that is not all. Because there is another secret of tragedy. It not only reveals our inner strength, it also teaches us we are not alone. In hardship, we begin to seek one another. We begin to build bridges. And that discovery is incredible because it turns out that even the deepest pain can be shared. And then it becomes lighter. And I'll tell you this, hope grows best in the soil of togetherness, where people are together, where one hand lifts another. That is why when the world unites after disaster, we feel there is something greater than tragedy. There is spirit, there is humanity, there is love. And at the end of this section, let me remind you, you already have this strength. It will not come from the outside. It does not depend on the government, on the economy, or on the weather. It is within you, and it waits only for one thing, your choice. Will you let tragedy break you, or will you let it awaken your true self? And next, we will talk about another amazing aspect, how hope, born in tragedy, not only saves us, but transforms us into a source of strength for others. That will be the third part. And there we will see even more deeply how tragedy can change not only a person, but the whole world. There is another secret worth talking about. Tragedy does not only change us personally, it has the power to change others through us. Because when you yourself find hope in the midst of darkness, you become a light for those still wandering in the shadows. You become living proof that it is possible to survive, to rise again, to find meaning where there seemed to be none. I have often repeated one phrase: you can do more for others if you first do more for yourself. This is not about selfishness, it is about responsibility. If you have learned to find hope in your own life, you automatically become a source of hope for those around you. Because people always look to examples, not just to words. Let me recall a story. I met a man who, during the war, lost his home, his job, all his possessions, but he did not break. He became a volunteer. Every day he handed out bread to those who had nothing to eat. When I asked him how he found the strength, he replied, "Jim, if I have even something small in my hands, I can give it to others. If I smile, I give someone hope, and that is enough to live." Think about that. A person who himself went through tragedy became a point of light for dozens of others. Why? Because his own hope became a gift. Have you ever experienced this? You look at someone who went through even greater hardship than you, and suddenly you feel renewed strength. That is the mechanism of hope. It is contagious. It spreads. And that is why our personal victory matters not only for us, but also for the world around us. Tragedy may destroy houses, but it also builds heroes. And sometimes heroes do not look like the ones we see in movies. They are the simple mother raising her children after losing their father. They are the neighbor bringing dinner to those who lost their home. They are the person who, instead of giving up, becomes a quiet testimony that life goes on. I want to speak directly to you right now. Maybe you are thinking, but what can I do? I'm not a hero. Let me tell you, heroism begins with the small. Heroism is being a light for even one person. It is not always about great deeds. Sometimes it is just a timely word, a hand extended, a smile in the dark. You know what my mentor once told me? Jim, real success is not what you earn, but what you give. I tested that thought for years and saw the greatest value of our lives lies in contribution. And especially when the world seems broken. Is it hard? Yes. Painful? Yes. But it is precisely when you carry your small spark to others that your own flame grows brighter. Because light does not diminish when shared. It multiplies. Let me give you another metaphor. Imagine you are walking at night through a dark forest. In your hand you hold a small flashlight. You can only see a few meters ahead. But then suddenly others appear with their own lights. And now the path is clear, the trees are visible, the horizon appears. That is the power of shared hope. When one shares their light, others pick it up. And then the darkness no longer seems so frightening. Tragedy changes the scale of life. It teaches us to think not only of ourselves, it opens the door to true compassion. And you know what's interesting? In such moments we see real unity. People of different nations, religions, languages become one body. Because tragedy does not ask who you are by passport. It asks only one question: are you able to remain human? I recall words from classic literature. It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And indeed, in tragedy, both poles coexist. It can reveal the worst in people: cruelty, selfishness, fear, but it can also reveal the best courage, generosity, love. And we choose who we will be. Friends, listen to one of my favorite quotes again. Don't wish it were easier, wish you were stronger. And this is not just a beautiful phrase, it is a strategy for survival and growth. Because tragedy will never be easy, it will always be hard, but you can always become stronger. And not only for yourself, but for those who are looking to you. Imagine now that you look at your life from the height of time, 20, 30 years pass, and you look back. What will you see? Will you see a person who was broken by tragedy, or a person who used even pain to give others an example of hope? This is a question worth asking yourself today, because the answer begins forming now in your decisions and your choices. And one more thing, extremely important. Tragedy teaches us to value every day. Time becomes more precious when we see how easily it can be cut short. And this awareness is a gift. It pushes us to live more fully, to love more sincerely, to work more devotedly. It reminds us life is fragile, but it is beautiful. And even in its fragility, there is greatness. So tragedy is not only a challenge, it is a school. It teaches us to be stronger, to be a light for others, to value every breath. And above all, it teaches us that hope is always near. It may seem small, but it never disappears. And you know what? In the next part, I will give you a few practical questions that will help you see where in your life this hope is already alive. We will do a small experiment of the heart, which may open new horizons. So don't go away. The most interesting part is ahead. My friends, we have already walked a long road together in these reflections. And before moving to the conclusion, let me pause, not for silence, but for a conversation with you. Because everything I have said only makes sense if you pass it through yourself. Not just listening, but asking yourself questions. I want you to imagine we are sitting side by side, perhaps in a small hall, or even over a cup of coffee, and I look you in the eye, and I ask, not to hear the answer out loud, but so that you can hear it within yourself. Here's the first question. How strongly do you believe in your own ability to recover after life's blows from 1 to 10? 1 means, I feel broken. 10 means, I know I can rise anywhere, anytime. Think about it. Your number is your current state. Don't judge yourself, just be honest, because awareness is the first step. Second question, how much do you allow tragedies to shape character in you instead of despair? Imagine your heart is clay. Tragedy either makes it fragile or fires it in the flame so that it becomes strong like ceramic. Where are you now on a scale from 1 to 10? Third question, how much are you able to share your hope with others? Remember the candle metaphor? When you light another, you don't lose your flame, you multiply it. Is your candle burning only for yourself, or are you lighting others? From 1 to 10, how much do you share your light? Fourth question, how often do you stop to value life itself, not just its achievements? Many people live as if life is endless and only wake up in tragedy. And you, do you know how to see beauty in the ordinary? 1 means almost never. 10 means every day I see a miracle, even in a simple sip of water. And the last fifth question, how honest are you with yourself in moments of pain? Because many pretend to be strong, but inside they are falling apart. And strength, my friends, begins with honesty. If you are honest with yourself, you are already on the path to healing. So rate from 1 to 10 how much you allow yourself to be sincere in your struggles. Don't rush. No need to speak the answers out loud. Just feel them. And remember the numbers. They are not a verdict. They are a guide, like a compass. If today you are at a 3 or 4, that only means one thing: there is room to grow. And that is wonderful. You know what I suggest? After this video ends, come back to these questions again. Maybe even write them in a notebook. Because as I always said, don't trust your memory. Write. When you put your thoughts on paper, you see yourself more clearly. It is like looking into a mirror. And now I want to give you one small practice. It is simple, but incredibly powerful. Close your eyes for a minute and imagine the tragedy you went through or the pain you still carry in your heart. Now imagine a small light beside it. It can be a candle, a flashlight, even a sunbeam breaking through the clouds, and allow this light to touch your pain, not to erase it, but to illuminate it, to show the pain is there, but it is not alone. There is light, there is hope. And you know what? If you can hold this light in your heart for even a few minutes a day, you are already building a new life. Because tragedy can take much, but it is powerless against someone who has decided to keep the light within. So, my friends, if these words have resonated with you, if they have lit your candle even a little, stay with us. Subscribe, leave a like, share in the comments. Which of these 5 answers surprised you the most? This matters not only for you, but also for others who will read it and feel, I am not alone. And now we will move forward to the conclusion, because there I want to leave you with one last word, an aphorism that may become your guiding star in the darkest times. My friends, we have walked a long road from pain to hope, from darkness to light. And if you take only one thought from this video, let it be this. Tragedy is never the end of the story. It only opens a new page. Because no matter what happens, you always have the right to choose. You cannot always control the wind, but you can always adjust the sails. You cannot always avoid the storm, but you can always decide how you will go through it. Hope is not a naive dream. It is the determination to live. It is the readiness to say, yes, I have fallen, but I will rise. And in that simple phrase lies everything. The person who decides to rise has already won. I want to leave you with a thought I have carried in my heart for many years. Don't wish it were easier. Wish you were stronger, because the world will not become safer, the storms will not cease. But you can grow strong enough that even the storm will not break you. So hold your light, share it. And remember, in the darkest night, even one candle can change everything, and that candle can be you.